Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, how did the Nephilim, those towering ancient giants, survive the great flood that was meant to wipe out all life on Earth? What if the real answer is far more shocking than anything you've ever imagined? Because here's the truth, most people have absolutely no idea what Moses revealed about the giants who somehow escaped annihilation. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. We've all been told a version of the flood story, but what if the story you grew up hearing about Noah the Ark and the divine judgment was only part of the truth? Some believe one of the giants snuck aboard the ark. Others claim the fallen angels sinned again, triggering a second wave of Nephilim. But buried deep in the scriptures lies something far more unsettling, a truth Moses encoded into the ancient text, a message for those brave enough to look beneath the surface. So ask yourself, are you ready to uncover what's been hidden in plain sight? Because this isn't just another theory. It's not just speculation. It's a divine revelation, and once you hear it, it will change the way you see the Bible forever. Strap in. We're about to journey into the forbidden shadows of biblical history, where giants walk, angels fall, and forgotten truths awaken from the dust of time. If you're intrigued, if you're ready to go deeper, drop a 7 in the comments to let us know you're with us on this path. What Moses revealed will shatter everything you thought you knew. The giants survived, and the answer, it's terrifying. A mystery sealed for ages, hidden in the holy text. Few dare to face it. Will you? It is one that can be traced back to the days that immediately followed the globe becoming submerged in judgment. It is highly possible that you have heard the statement that the Nephilim, who were once towering giants, met their end as a result of the Great Flood. In the event that this were the case, however, how would we account for the giants that were observed following the flood? Who was it that allowed them to return? The hypothesis that some Nephilim mysteriously resurfaced after the floodwaters had cleansed the world is widely accepted by the majority of mankind. However, let's go back in time. Nephilim, which can be interpreted as fallen ones or giants, were the offspring of the sons of God, the fallen angels, and the daughters of humanity, according to Genesis 6. This information is provided for individuals who are not familiar with the Bible. This was not only a group of towering men. In addition to being mythical beings, they were also corrupt hybrids of heaven and earth. In addition, their presence was not merely a passing remark. The fundamental reason that God allowed the flood to occur in the first place was because of this. Is it possible to conceive of evil that is so powerful and so wicked that the Creator himself made the decision to reset the world? There is a passage in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 that states, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them." Men of renown, they were the historical heroes of the past. This eerie sentence, as well as the years that followed, has been the subject of controversy for centuries. When Moses said it, what did he mean? Was he dropping hints about a return that nobody anticipated? Something that was unimaginable had place a long time before Noah during the reign of Jared at the time. There is more detail in the book of Enoch, but Genesis already provides us with the fundamentals of the account. Angels who were previously divine beings descended to earth after falling from their divine position here on earth. The mysteries of battle, sorcery, and seduction were taught to humanity by them, which were things that humans were never intended to receive. Moreover, the Nephilim came into existence as a result of their marriage with females. Beyond their enormous stature, these entities were also horrible. They tainted everything they came into contact with. Imagine what the planet was like during that era. The land was filled with violence. The whole race had lost its innocence. It is written in Genesis 6:5 that the Lord observed how vast the wickedness of the human race had become on earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. This is something that the Lord saw. The heart of the Creator was broken. He was not a tyrant in his lack of anger. Like a father, he was overcome with grief. In this way, God made a declaration of mournful judgment, saying, "I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast." However, in the midst of all this darkness, there was one light, and that was Noah. Noah was a virtuous man while living in a period that was corrupt. During the time that the earth was being ruled by fallen angels and perversion, Noah remained faithful. In Genesis 6-9, it is stated that Noah was a righteous individual who was flawless in his generation. Moreover, Noah walked alongside God. Are you ever curious about what it would be like to be in such a position of isolation? If no one else believed in you, would you be able to pull it off? Noah was the one that God picked to protect the remnant. His instructions were heavenly, and they instructed him to construct an ark out of gopher wood with precise dimensions and a sacred purpose. Noah did what he was told. The animals were gathered by him. His family was gathered together. After that, the heavens began to open. The ground suddenly erupted from its depths and the water level surged. The terrifying narrative is found in Genesis chapter 7. The death of every living thing that moved on land was inevitable. All of the creatures that swarm over the world, and all of people including birds, livestock, wild animals, and all of the beasts. Noah and those who were in the ark with him were the only ones remaining. Here there is no room for ambiguity. Anything that was not contained within that vessel of obedience was obliterated. Every living thing, every air that breathes, and every monstrosity it contains. To put it another way, therein lies the conundrum, however. How is it that we are able to see giants again after only a few generations have passed, if the flood was responsible for the extinction of all living things, including the Nephilim? How is it that during the time of Moses, when the Israelites were standing on the edge of the land that had been given to them, they were looking up at the exact beings that God had once wiped off the face of the earth? The remarks of the spies who explored Canaan are recorded in the book of Numbers 13 and 33. While we were there, we witnessed the giants who are the offspring of Anak, who are the giants. Furthermore, we were in our own eyes as if we were grasshoppers. This brought us within their line of sight. Just picture that. With the sight of these gigantic monsters, grown men and warriors were reduced to tremble before their eyes. Are you able to sense their fear? In the event that you were one of those spies who were standing in the shadow of these giants, would you have had the courage to speak faith words? Or would you have also stated that we are unable to take possession of this land? This is how it is expressed in another translation. The Nephilim were on display there. A group of people known as the Nephilim are Anak's descendants. Nephilim is the word all over again. Not a different racial group. Not only the large dudes, in the same tainted lineage of bloodlust. Presently, the question is like a mountain that is standing in front of us. Where did these enormous beings originate from? Who would have the audacity to reconstruct them if God had genuinely destroyed them? Or did something manage to persist? Just before we find out what Moses has to say to us next, you should ask yourself this. What would happen if the adversary discovered a gap in the system? Is it possible that evil never left but rather merely hid until the appropriate moment to emerge once more? Several people have muttered a hypothesis, daring, odd, and even a little bit desperate. There are many who believe that a Nephilim, who is a monstrous giant that existed prior to the deluge, was able to cling to the ark in some way. It's possible that he hid his identity. Is it possible that he clung to the edges of the vessel, concealing himself beneath the waves? It is the kind of story that people tell when they are unable to adequately describe what they have witnessed. But is there any basis in reality for this concept? Now that we have taken a step back, let's analyze the sacred text itself. What exactly does the book of Genesis say that revelation is made very apparent in Genesis 9:18-19? Shem, Ham, and Japheth were the three sons of Noah who emerged from the ark after it had gone through the waters. He is also known as Ham, the father of Canaan. The three sons of Noah are all pictured here. In addition to that, the entire planet was covered by them. Now read that again in a slow manner. It was one of them that spread across the entire planet. All of the people who survived the flood are said to be descended from these three individuals, as stated in the Bible. It was Japheth, Shem, and Ham. There are no stowaways. There are no giants clinging to ropes. The hull does not conceal any organisms to be found beneath it. Within the confines of this verse, there is no room for mystery passengers. Consequently, if Noah's family was the only ones responsible for repopulating the planet, then how can we explain the appearance of giants after that? The sons of Anak and Canaan, or even Goliath, are excellent examples. The Philistine warrior who defended his integrity in the face of Israel. Is it possible that the origin of this bloodline was concealed not in plain sight, but rather in the very blood of Noah's own lineage? To begin, let's pose the challenging question. It's possible that one of Noah's sons, or their wives, already inherited the genetic taint of the fallen ones. This may be quite interesting. What are the chances that the Nephilim line was not eradicated in its physical form, but rather kept in seed form? After all, is it not the case that the Bible does not contain a complete list of all the ladies who were born to the sons of God and human women? The focus is on the line of promise rather than on every branch that has been polluted. Take, for example, Adam and Eve. Both Cain and Abel, as well as Seth, were present. In addition, the Bible makes it quite plain in Genesis 5:4 that Adam had other children, both males and daughters. A good number of their names are not documented. It is possible that the same thing is true for the daughters that are born to fallen angels and human women who have been married. In the event that some of these girls were able to survive, or if their descendants were able to marry into Noah's extended family, what would happen? Does it seem possible that one of the wives on that ark would have possessed the recessive characteristics of the Nephilim, not in the capacity of a giant or a warrior, but rather as a receptacle of latent blood? Is it possible that the virus of heaven's revolt may have quietly rode the ark while it was still in the womb of human traditions? It is possible that this is the reason why we continue to see giants after the flood. It is not because any physical Nephilim survived, but rather because something genetic did, and it reappeared generation after generation, initially remaining quiet and then surging. A description of the children of Anak in the country of Canaan can be found in the book of Numbers. These children were described as being so enormous that the Israelite spies exclaimed, "We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we actually look the same to them." 1333 is the number. On the other hand, there is a possibility that a second wave of fallen angels committed sins after the flood, lusting after human women and spawning fresh Nephilim. This is a notion that is suggested by some individuals. Nevertheless, even that argument starts to fall apart when an additional ancient document is taken into consideration. One of the most renowned Jewish texts, the Book of Enoch, which is cited in Jude 14, provides a concerning tale. An unyielding judgment was handed down by God after the first group of angels, who were known as the Watchers, fell and took human wives, so imparting forbidden knowledge to humanity. The day of judgment had not yet arrived, and these angels were confined in the shadows until then. And what is even more illuminating is the response that the archangels themselves responded with. In the book of Enoch, chapter 68, the archangel Michael shook. Raphael was the one he turned to and said, "Who is able to endure the severe judgment that has been executed before they melt away?" He continued by saying, "I will not take their part under the eye of the Lord, because the Lord of spirits has been angry with them. Everything that is concealed will befall them for all of eternity." Give that some thought. Because of the gravity of this judgment, Michael, who is considered to be one of the most powerful beings in heaven, was shaken. Would any other angel have the courage to make the same error that he did if he feared it? What would you do if you had to stand before God and watch as your brothers and sisters were shackled for all eternity? Michael's refusal to protect the Watchers was not the only thing he did. According to him, neither angels nor humans were able to withstand the judgment that was handed down to them. Because they pretended to be gods, they were sentenced to an eternity of incarceration. As a result, would it appear to be a plausible possibility that another group of angels attempted it once more, knowing what was in store for them? It is a different picture that is painted in the book of Enoch, one in which the revolt of the Watchers was definitive, and no angel since then has been dumb enough to recreate their fall. In the event that this is the case, then the option for new Nephilim to be born to celestial fathers is completely closed. So once more we inquire, where did they originate from? It would appear that every path leads back to Ham, and possibly Japheth as well. This fact is driven home by the book of Genesis, which states that the sons of Noah who emerged from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and that the entire earth was spread out among them. No unknown beings or hidden beings were responsible for the repopulation of the world. In order to repopulate it, Noah's sons did so. Is it possible that the Nephilim returned to their homeland through the branch that was inherited by Ham? Was it possible that the Canaanite bloodline contained more than just the spirit of rebellion? A buried echo of the fallen was carried by it along with memory and mutation. And this is the question that we all find ourselves pondering. If you had been on that ark, would you have been able to glimpse what was discovered buried deep within the blood of another person? Is it possible that you would have been aware of what was waiting to emerge once more in the generations that followed? Because it is not always the case that what survives is the same thing that clings to the exterior of the ark. This is what is tucked away, concealed, passed down through generations, and patient. A fresh page was turned in the annals of human history when the floodwaters subsided and the ark was able to find a place to rest. When Noah and his family finally made it to dry land, they were the only people to have survived a world that had been cleansed by the judgment of God. However, despite the fact that this was a new beginning, darkness from the past continued to linger. It is written in the book of Genesis that Noah planted a vineyard at some point after the deluge, drank the wine that it produced, and then became intoxicated. An unsettling occurrence took place while he was at his most vulnerable. There was something that involved his kid Ham. At this point, the result is the most important thing to consider, even if we will discuss the complete facts of this incident in a different movie. Because of what Ham did, Noah did not curse Ham directly, but he did curse Ham's offspring, namely Canaan, who was Ham's son. According to the words of Noah, which are recorded in Genesis 9:25, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." This wasn't a little reprimand at all. It was a proclamation of the future that would have an impact on future generations. However, here is a question that questions centuries of misunderstandings that have been developed. Has it ever been brought to your attention that every single one of Ham's offspring was cursed? Are persons of African descent in some way subject to the affliction of Ham? Sadly, a great number of people have been led to believe this untruth. I want to make it perfectly obvious that this teaching is a misrepresentation. You won't find that in the Bible. The Bible never mentions that Ham was cursed. There was just Canaan. In the Bible, there is no mention of the curse of Ham. What some people have used to legitimize racism and slavery is not something that the Word of God ever meant to allow. A doctrine that has been manufactured, a distortion of sacred text for the aim of achieving evil goals. Count the number of generations who have been harmed as a result of a lie that was wrapped in Scripture. Take some time to think on what you've learned here, especially if it's something new. Please leave a remark below with the number 777 to show your support for revelation and truth if this truth is breaking old chains of misunderstanding. Let's get back to the story that is currently being told. Let's take a closer look at Ham's line of reasoning. Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan were the names of Ham's 4 sons according to the narrative in Genesis 10. While Cush is associated with Ethiopia, Mizraim is related with ancient Egypt. Put has connections to various regions in Libya. Moreover, Canaan established its settlement in the land that would eventually serve as the battlefield for the conflict for Israel's inheritance, which was known as the Promised Land. But keep in mind that Noah's curse was primarily aimed at Canaan and not at any of the other nations. On the other hand, the descendants of Canaan would go on to become some of the most notorious peoples in the Bible. According to the Bible, the children of Canaan was comprised of Sidon and Heth, as well as the founders of several tribes, including the Jebusites, Amorites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, and others. This information can be found in Genesis 10:15 through 18. The villages in question were not small. They grew into entire nations which were firmly rooted in the practices of idolatry and evil. Please give that some time to settle in. The cursed line of Canaan was responsible for the birth of tribes that would eventually populate the country of Canaan. From the coastal city of Sidon to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were notorious for their disobedience toward God. The appearance of giants in these territories would occur once more, but this time it would be after the deluge rather than before it. How did they make their way back, and why are we here? Was it merely an act of defiance? Is it possible that something more sinister and ancient has been passed down through the genetic lineage of Canaan at some point? Take this into consideration. Nimrod, the first powerful man to be characterized as a powerful hunter in front of the Lord, originated from Ham's line through Cush of the Israelites. Nimrod was the one who was responsible for the construction of Babel and Nineveh, both of which were places of pride and stubbornness in opposition to heaven. The Philistines, who were the people of Goliath, emerged from the same line. They were giants who once again stood against the people whom God had chosen. However, in spite of all of these warnings, these descendants continued on with their behavior. They became powerful by establishing kingdoms, building cities, and expanding their territory. However, their blood contained more than just hopes and dreams. It conveyed pollution, which may have been a residual residue of what started in the days of Jared, when fallen angels defiled the body of man. As the Israelites were getting ready to enter the land that had been promised to them, God gave them instructions in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 2. He does not instruct them to engage in haggling. He does not instruct them to live together. His instruction is for them to thoroughly annihilate the nations that they will be confronting. How come? Because the nations in question were not exclusively pagan. They were completely tainted by corruption. When the Lord your God will bring you into the country where do you intend to take possession of it, it is commanded that you strike them and completely annihilate them. You are not to enter into a covenant with them, nor are you to show mercy to them. 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy 7 in the Bible. The conquering was not brutal in any way. It was a command from God to maintain the holiness of the place. The Israelites were about to visit a land that had been drenched in rebellion from generation to generation and was inhabited by people whose rebellion had reached its peak. Idolatry, the sacrifice of children, sexual perversion, and the potential resurgence of the Nephilim bloodline are all possibilities. All of it was located in Canaan. It was not God's intention for his people to get contaminated with whatever had been revived there. As a result, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites were designated for expulsion. This is not due to their nationality, but rather to the spiritual corruption that they have maintained. Not the skin, but the bloodlines were at issue. It wasn't about land, it was about legacy. In this case, it was about maintaining the covenant. You are the subject of the inquiry at this point. If you were standing on the brink of the land that God had promised, and you heard God's orders to purify what has become contaminated beyond repair, would you obey those instructions from God? On the other hand, would you be hesitant because you do not comprehend the significance of what is beneath the surface? Therefore, there are situations when evil does not appear to be terrible at first. There are moments when it presents itself as cities, families, customs, and even history. When God states that it should be destroyed, however, he is not being cruel, rather he is being reasonable. Now, when we put all of the parts together, Genesis, the book of Enoch, the judgment on the watchers, and the unexplained reappearance of giants after the flood, it is difficult to deny that there is one truth. When the floodwaters subsided, the sins of the fallen angels did not come to an end. It persevered in some way. This was not a creature that could be seen clinging to the edge of the ark. Rather, it was a whisper that was concealed within bloodlines and was passed on silently through generations. In addition, there is a certain line that serves as the location where this corruption has taken up residence, in the generation of Canaan. In fact, it was the precise same line that Noah condemned, nor due to the color of their skin, nor due to feelings of superiority or inferiority, but rather due to something much more fundamental, a pollution that went beyond the realm of culture and into the area of genetic regulation. Let's take a moment to pause and lean into a contemporary knowledge in order to gain a better understanding of an old mystery. You do understand how genetics operate, right? If even one of the parents possesses the gene-dominant characteristics like brown eyes are more likely to be inherited. On the other hand, recessive characteristics such as blue eyes can remain concealed for generations, and they only become apparent when two carriers pass them on to their offspring. Imagine for a moment that the Nephilim feature of gigantism operates in such a manner here, waiting dormant and invisible. Can you imagine what would happen if that corrupt gene was passed down through the generations of the Canaan people? Imagine for a moment that it remained hidden for many generations until the ideal combination brought it back into the light until a child like Goliath was born. And if you had been alive at that historical period, would you have been able to recognize it from a distance? If you had simply looked, would you have been able to tell who carried the legacy of those who had passed away? Now take this into consideration. In ancient times, it was normal for members of the same family to marry each other. It wasn't considered a taboo back then. This is how the human race evolved. When individuals with common bloodlines had children, however, it was a risky situation from a genetic standpoint. It was much more likely that recessive characteristics would be inherited. In addition, if the Nephilim feature was recessive, what do you believe happened when descendants of the Canaanites married within their own tribes? It was not because of new sins committed by angels that the repercussions were enormous. Rather, it was because the old seed reappeared. There is evidence in the Bible that backs up the existence of interfamily marriages. One example is Abraham and Sarah. According to the book of Genesis chapter 20, verse 12, Abraham confesses to Abimelech that she is in fact his sister and the daughter of his father, but not the daughter of his mother. She eventually became my wife. Not a metaphor, that is so. That is a literal statement. His half-sister was a woman named Sarah. Aside from that, they were not the only ones. Incestuous marriages were a common practice in the early stages of human history, long before the law was established. The Book of Jubilees, the Book of Enoch, and the Book of Jasher all record various relationships similar to these, despite the fact that not all traditions consider them to be canonical. From the children of Adam to the sons of Jared and Noah, it was usual for close relatives to marry each other. How come? Because the population was quite low. On the other hand, the consequences were huge from a genetic and spiritual standpoint. Imagine for a moment that this is taking place within Canaan's tribe. In addition to being cursed, this individual may already be bearing vestiges of the Nephilim lineage. Is it possible that the dormant feature of gigantism was reawakened as a result of their engagement to members of their own family, not only in Goliath, but also in other people who came before him and subsequently? The reason for this is that God issued a mandate that may appear harsh to modern ears. During the 7th chapter of Deuteronomy, God instructs the Israelites to entirely wipe out the 7 nations that were residing in Canaan. The reason for this was not simply that they were idolaters. Rather, there was something more profound at play. Something tainted going back in time and maybe genetic in nature. As for God, he is just. In addition to this, he does not permit cycles of destruction to continue unchecked. In the end, Jesus established new criteria, making it very apparent that the things that had been permitted in the days of the beginnings would no longer be acceptable in the days of the covenant. This command is given by God in Leviticus 18:9, and it is quite firm. Even the nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother, regardless of whether she was born in your own country or in another country, not even their nakedness shall be revealed to you. The issue was not limited to morality alone. It was about preventing another generation from hearing the echo of something that had once come dangerously close to destroying the globe. It was about protecting the purity of the people. Allow me to bring this to your attention for a brief moment. Would you have been able to notice the gradual resurgence of something that was long gone if you had lived during that time period and been oblivious of the hidden characteristics that existed within your own family line? If God advised you to go your separate ways, would you heed to him? To bring down to pieces, is it to destroy? Even when you were unable to comprehend the reason? Simply because there are instances when the things that God wishes us to get go of are not readily apparent. That is a spiritual. It is ingrained in successive generations. And if it is allowed to continue unchecked, it will continue to rise. Greater in stature, volume, and defiance. It is similar to Goliath. It's possible that you've heard the classic tale of David and Goliath 100 times. However, have you ever given any thought to the question of where Goliath actually originated? It's not just the arena of battle. In addition to Gath, it is his family tree and his blood, where he came from. Because what the Bible reveals is something that very few people actually pay attention to. Ham was a member of the generation that Goliath belonged to. Let's jump right into the reading of the text. The Bible describes him in 1 Samuel 17:4, and it is said that a champion named Goliath of Gath emerged from the camp of the Philistines. His height was 6 cubits and a span, and he was a giant. In terms of height, that is around 9 feet and 9 inches. It is a literal giant. However, Goliath was not the only adversary. Further descriptions of people from Gath can be found in the Bible. And there was still a war in Gath where there was a guy of tremendous stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, with a total of 4 and 20 toes on each foot. Additionally, he was born to the giant's mother, according to 2 Samuel 21:20. This was not only a group of towering men. In reality, they were the progeny of something more profound. This passage comes to a conclusion by stating that these 4 individuals were born to the giant in Gath and were brought down by David and his servants simultaneously. A singular outlier, Goliath, was not an exception. It was a family of giants that he hailed from. It has its origins in a very particular bloodline. Where did that line of ancestry originate from? According to the book of Genesis chapter 10, Ham, Noah's son, had a number of children. We have Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. It was in Mizraim that the nation of Egypt was established. Furthermore, the descendants of Mizraim gave rise to the Casluhim, and the Casluhim gave rise to the Philistim, the people that came before the Philistines. You did indeed read that correctly. Ham's generation was directly responsible for the creation of the Philistines, which was the identical nation that Goliath battled for. Genesis chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. The ancient dots are finally being connected, so let's get started. The imposing appearance of Goliath did not come about by chance. The origin of his power height and even his six-fingered relatives can be traced back to a gene that has been misused, that most likely traveled through the land of Canaan, Ham's most afflicted offspring and descent. The Bible gives the impression that Noah's sons' wives may not have been as pure as Noah himself, despite the fact that Noah himself was righteous and won favor in the eyes of God. Furthermore, if even a single one of them possessed a recessive Nephilim characteristic, then that dormant legacy may have been passed down in silence from one generation to the next until it once again showed itself in the form of giants. According to our current understanding, recessive genes have the potential to remain concealed for decades. You might not be able to see them, but they are present, lying dormant within the pathways of blood, waiting for the appropriate mix to reawaken. What if Goliath was nothing more than the obvious manifestation of a cursed root that had been concealed for a very long time? This distinction appeared to be emphasized on multiple occasions by Moses, the author of the book of Genesis. In no instance did he refer to Ham by his name alone. He made it a point to repeat this phrase over and over again, Ham, the father of Canaan. Why am I being so insistent? Is it possible that Moses, who was inspired by God, was attempting to bring attention to a lineage that contains vital information? In addition to being the source of revolt, the line that gave birth to giants, according to the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verse 22, Ham, the father of Canaan, witnessed his father's nakedness and informed his two brothers who were not naked. Furthermore, in verse 18, it is said that Shem, Ham, and Japheth were the sons of Noah who emerged from the ark. He is also known as Ham, the father of Canaan. The repetition is carried out on purpose. The separation is a creation of God. Where exactly did the people of Canaan make their home? In a region that might experience the arrival of giants in the future? The sons of Anak, the Emims, and the Rephaim are all depicted in the Bible as being people of great stature, adversaries of Israel, and hurdles in the land that was promised to them. Using the numbers 1333, the scenario is brought to life. The giants who are the sons of Anak appeared before us there. They are the descendants of the giants. In addition, we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and as a result, we were in their perspective. Is there a pattern going on here? Are you able to sense the resumption of the ancient echo? By the time Deuteronomy 2:10-11 was written, the Moabites had already recalled these entities. In times past, the Emims lived there. They were a big people, as many as the Anakims, and as tall as they were. The Anakims were also considered to be giants. These are not tales from a fairy tale. It was a matter of recollections. It was terrible to think about the recollections. The reason that God gave Israel a command that may sound harsh to modern ears is precisely because of this reason. However, to those who are spiritually discerned, this demand represents a surgical strike against corruption. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 3, God sent a warning that you are not to marriage with them. When it comes to your girls, you are not to give them to their boys, nor are you to take their daughters for your own sons. It was not because God was biased. Rather, he was shielding his covenant people from a genetic and spiritual taint that had once come dangerously close to destroying the earth. Consequently, here is a question that is worth pondering. If you were an Israelite and you were looking across the border into a land of giants, descendants of a cursed bloodline, and born of a sin that was older than the flood itself, what actions would you have taken? If God had given you a directive, would you have hesitated to obey it? Or would you have been able to recall that there are occasions when mercy is demonstrated by obedience rather than tolerance? The reason for this is that in God's sight, it was not only about nations. There was a connection between Bloodlines' destiny and the safeguarding of the world from a second fall. Therefore, what does this old riddle represent for us in the present day It serves as a reminder that not all evil behaves in the same manner as a monster. One type of giant does not carry a sword. They live in obscurity in clandestine bloodlines and in practices that have been handed down from generation to generation. The giants in your life might not be named Goliath, but they could be fear compromised, generational curses, or silent habits that undermine destiny. These are all examples of giants within your life. The titans that no one sees coming are sometimes the ones that pose the greatest threat. However, here is the reality. God is increasing the number of people who will pass on courage at the same time that the adversary is attempting to pass on depravity. As is the case with rebellion, righteousness can be passed down through generations. And when one person makes the decision to stand up, it has the potential to liberate an entire generation. You who are at this very moment seeing this were not born by chance. The spiritual lineage that you belong to was chosen to battle to triumph and to defend what is holy. You are a member of this holy lineage. God is rising people like you today to face modern Goliaths with faith, clarity, and confidence. Just as God raised David to face giants, he is raising people like you to face modern Goliaths. There is more to this story than just history. This is a wake-up call to examine your bloodline, to break what needs to be broken, to protect what needs to be protected, and to refuse to allow hidden giants to rise again as a result of ignorance or indifference. Because they will continue to rise even if you do nothing. But here's the truth: if you stay faithful and obedient, those giants will fall. Today, take a moment to ask yourself, what have I been tolerating that God already told me to let go of? What spiritual giants have I allowed to remain simply because I thought they no longer posed a threat? Sometimes what we ignore becomes what controls us. If this message gave you clarity, sparked something in your spirit, or opened your eyes in a new way, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Stand for truth. Let others feel the fire too. Want to declare boldly that the giants end with you? Type 777 in the comments. Let it be your sign of victory. If you never want to miss another powerful revelation, hit subscribe and join us on this journey. To those who support us through super thanks, we see you and we honor the sacrifices you've made. May God return your generosity tenfold. And whether you give or not, your time here is deeply valued. I pray that God gives you vision to see clearly, strength to stand boldly, and courage to defeat every hidden enemy in your life. Stay grounded, stay alert, and stay faithful to who God made you to be. Until we meet again.